African Transformation Movement is calling for the former Eskom CEO, André de Ruyter, to be summoned to appear before Parliament. This follows de Ruyter's explosive television interview in which he alleged that the ANC was involved in corruption at the parastatal. He also said that there was a criminal syndicate in Mpumalanga that was improperly benefiting money in the region of about R1 billion monthly from Eskom. Now, the ATM has written to the Speaker of the National Assembly, asking her to summon de Ruyter. Let's speak to the President of the ATM now, Vuyo Zungula. Mr. Zungula, thank you for making time for us. Can Parliament summon a former CEO of this entity or any other entity who's left, in this case, with immediate effect? How would that work?
Parliament, Clement, can summon anyone for any work that it wants to do. You'll recall that currently there's a Section 194 committee that is proceeding in Parliament, and Parliament, that committee has summoned people who are no longer in the employ of the Office of the Public Protector. So there's nothing stopping Parliament from summoning Mr. André de Ruyter, because it is important that whatever that he has raised in that interview is tested, and there's something that comes out of it. One of the biggest problems we face in our country is that corruption is made a matter of perception. People go to the media, they allege that certain people are corrupt, and it ends there. The formal processes of dealing with corrupt practices and corrupt actions is not thoroughly followed upon. That is why, as the ATM, we believe that when André de Ruyter goes to Parliament and he deposits whatever that he's deposited in that interview, and Parliament, via the respective committee, can take the necessary action in order to deal with the matter.
Yeah. What do you want André de Ruyter to specifically address and brief Parliament on? He made a number of allegations. What kind of evidence do you want him to bring forth? And what action can Parliament take if he refuses to come or refuses to disclose the details you want from him?
Firstly, Mr. André de Ruyter, when he was the CEO, he accounted to Parliament. You'll recall that a couple of times there's different portfolio committees that have gone to Eskom, that have summoned Eskom to Parliament. And all of these things that he's saying in that interview, he did not say it to the relevant, appropriate body. Now, that is the first problem, that how is it that he's able to speak openly to a television interview about the corrupt practices of certain ministers and what is basically killing Eskom, but the institution he accounts to, he does not take it upon himself to account and open up and bring the necessary information. Therefore, the point of departure, it is for him to explain in depth what is explained in that interview and give names, because it is not proper for him to say there's a certain government minister, a senior politician. There must be names so that if Parliament has got to take any action against anyone, Parliament is able to know this minister said this to Mr. de Ruyter. This minister knows of corruption that is happening in Eskom, that is killing the entity and leading to load shedding, but this minister turned a blind eye. But we cannot operate on, on vague utterances by a person who was in a position of authority that ought to communicate and account more directly to Parliament.
And there's no question that, government and even the law enforcement agencies have a responsibility to follow through on the claims that he's made. But what responsibility does he have to also disclose who this senior politician is, who is involved in corruption, and who this minister who told him he must allow people to eat, who that minister is, right? Because then you've got to come out and say, this is the person who's involved in that corruption. It's not only ending with you going to a minister and opening up to them about this senior politician. Law enforcement agencies have got to be involved.
Indeed. Look, André de Ruyter was the accounting officer for Eskom. Therefore, any accounting officer has got a responsibility, to report to the necessary authorities about any wrongdoing that is happening in an entity that he is given charge of. Now, Parliament is critical because the SOEs, the executive, they account to Parliament. Parliament is an oversight body. to ensure that whatever that is happening in the SOEs and in the departments, it is in line with what the laws of our country require. Therefore, the obligation of Mr. de Ruyter, first and foremost, is for him to account to Parliament, that institution that the Constitution has given that responsibility of playing an oversight role on. And I heard when Clement, the secretary of the ANC, saying Mr. André de Ruyter must lay a charge and, they must report to the law enforcement authorities, as if that is going to magically make the situation to be correct. Look, Mr. Arthur Fraser laid a charge in June last year regarding Phala. Over 7 months, there's nothing that has been done, simply because the very same ANC people that are presiding over those utilities have a significant influence also in these institutions that should be doing those investigations. That is why there's delays even in Phala investigation, even to an extent whereby if you ask the Hawks or the NPA whether they're investigating the president, they are not going to say directly they're investigating the president. However, when it comes to Parliament, there's opposition parties there that have been vocal and critical in terms of holding the executive accountable. That is why we believe that under this collapsed state of the ANC, because the ANC is the enemy of the state, the ANC has collapsed institutions. The only institution that people must have a bit of a faith in, it is Parliament, simply because there's opposition parties there that have been fighting against the misrule of the ANC.
Mm. Are you at all concerned about this immediate departure from Eskom by André de Ruyter? Do you think it's part of a cover-up by the board? Because that's a suggestion that's been made by some.
Yes, indeed. You can't have a person that resigns last year and there's an agreement that is going to leave at the end of March. This person has an interview. He somewhat spills the beans or talks about the corruption that is there, because it could be, if he as a CEO knew about this corruption and reported to the minister, there's a great possibility that even some of the board members are aware about the corruption that is happening and the governance that we see in Eskom, but they are turning a blind eye. So for him to suddenly depart from the Eskom utility, hardly a few days after that explosive interview, it is a cause for concern. That is why it's critical that there must be a proper platform, which is a portfolio committee in Parliament, whereby all of those things can be tested, because the current board is also accountable to Parliament. Therefore, if André de Ruyter, in his conversation with the portfolio committee, implicates some of the board members, will know as a committee that there's something that we can do to hold these existing members, board members accountable.
But if the board was trying to silence him by getting him to leave now, it's not like anything stops André de Ruyter from speaking, unless there's some non-disclosure agreement we don't know about.
Yeah, it could be. It could be that there's a non-disclosure part. The fact that, he's made to resign or he's made to leave immediately after that interview, that should give it away to almost anyone that you've got a board, you've got some ministers that are trying so hard to protect these corrupt elements in Eskom. And these board members, I would argue that they do not have the best interest of the utility at heart, because how would you protect the corrupt elements that are leading to the death of Eskom? The death of Eskom is leading to the devastation in terms of lives of South Africans, because load shedding is a result of those corrupt elements. Now, with load shedding, people are losing their jobs, they're losing their livelihoods. Basically, load shedding is leading to this depressed state that our country is in. Therefore, if the board was acting in the best interest of the utility, acting in the best interest of the country, they would not have, appeared to silence Mr. de Ruyter. Rather, they would openly question him to say, as a CEO, this is what we said in the media. Now take us into confidence as to who are these people. Because the board, what we are not hearing from the board is that the board has heard these utterances from Mr. de Ruyter. This is the action plan to make sure that whatever that has been ventilated in that interview gets to be tested, and there's a necessary steps that are taken to correct those issues.
Yeah. Just lastly, as the ATM, how do you assess his tenure at Eskom, André de Ruyter. I mean, he's raised, important issues, made allegations of corruption, which have got to be investigated. And I know as opposition parties, you're putting pressure not just on de Ruyter to disclose more on the claims that he's made, but you're pushing for some accountability and law enforcement agencies to investigate those claims. But we mustn't be sidestepped or be deviated from also looking at and assessing properly his tenure as Eskom CEO. As the ATM, how do you assess that?
Clement, the discussion surrounding the departure of Mr. de Ruyter, it is not, a performance assessment for him because, he'd already resigned. The focus should be on those corrupt elements that is, is unearthed, particularly the existing or the current practicing government ministers who are turning a blind eye or also encouraging the corruption in Eskom. Because what we must not run away from, what we must try to avoid is a case whereby instead of dealing with the root causes of the failures of Eskom, which is the corruption, people are going to say, but this de Ruyter has failed. We know he's failed. Even himself, he's confirmed that he's failed. He's not, he's not fighting. So there's nothing that we need to, assess in terms of his performance. He has failed. He's also agreed that he has failed. But what's important for us, it is to deal with the systematic issues of corruption in Eskom that will make even the next CEO not to be able to be effective and able to actually turn around the utility, because the underlying corrupt practices are still there, because we are not giving a proper platform for people who are exposing these corrupt practices to be given a time and a space, to ventilate all of those corrupt practices and name the names, point fingers, and make sure that decisive action is taken against all of the culprits.
All right. ATM President Vuyo Zungula, thank you so much for making time for us this afternoon.